Hello, everybody. I believe we're live streaming now. We want to welcome you and thank you at the same time for coming and spending some time here with us tonight. I do apologize those of you that are watching. I guess it's kind of an apology. The Power of Faith Radio is offline at this time, and we're working to restore the radio station, and I kind of going to miss looking over there. The program's still running, Rabbi, so when I look over there, I see it running, but there's nothing going on. So, but we want to welcome you that are listening via Torah for the Nation's YouTube channel. We thank you so much for coming. Listen, if you're not a member, if you've not subscribed to Torah for the Nation YouTube channel, we want to invite you to subscribe to that channel. Hit that notification bell where you will be notified of every live video or that Rabbi Pesach does and that we do on Wednesday night. Also Torah for the Nation, and also now Rabbi, I want to throw this in because somebody did ask me this question. They really miss Shara, your wife, doing videos. Now, will she be picking those videos back up when she comes back to Sfat? Oh, you're muted for some reason.
Yeah, no, there you go. I was typing on the keyboard, so.
Okay.
Good question, Shira. She's going through a growth period now, and I don't know. Hopefully, that she'll go back to doing it. She doesn't realize herself how important what she does is, and what people are, what people think of it. So she sometimes gets a little discouraged. Not enough comments, not enough this, not enough that. So wow, like that. That's a Harley back there, right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, Ronald, way to go. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Or good day to you.
Oh, you from down under?
Yeah, Victoria, Australia.
Well, welcome. And welcome, James. Good to see you. Yeah, Shira will probably start doing it again by the beginning of March, probably.
Okay. Good deal.
Start doing it, to make a long story short.
All right. Well, let me finish welcoming those of you that are listening by B'nai Noach Connection with Israel Facebook page. We wanted to invite you and ask you to share those videos with all your social media platforms and search to join the group. It's an open group, and we don't debate there, but it's a place where you can come and find some great knowledge. And also, we are broadcasting live tonight on B'nai Noach Community of Tennessee. And so we want to welcome everybody that has joined us through those platforms. Okay, Rabbi Pesach, go ahead.
Okay.
Take off.
Welcome. Thank you, Scotty. Thank you. It's also on my personal Facebook page, Pesach Sherbo. You can go there and watch it also. We'd love you to come join the Zoom room. I know Zoom is a little bit of a hassle sometimes. It is easier to sit back and watch it on Facebook or YouTube. But if you can come into the Zoom room, especially if you have some questions, because sometimes we miss them on the chats on the various pages where it's going out. We appreciate very much the listening to people around the world that listen to us from South America and from across Europe. Of course, Europe is a little early for them there, but there are people there that listen from Europe. And of course, on the Australia side of the world, and New Zealand, and everybody down there, and they're in the middle of their day. I'm just getting up in the morning, and I know in America it's kind of East Coast 10 p.m. and West Coast. What does that make it? 7 p.m. on the West Coast. We appreciate you after a long weekend joining us and being with us. As Scotty was saying, we're essentially information givers. We're not trying to convince anybody of anything. We're not trying to evangelize. We're not trying to tell anybody something is better than something else. But because the Jewish history has so long been associated with the God that says he's the God of Israel, And a lot of people are starting to understand that that's the place to be if you want true information. Just come right along and we'll give you information. What you do with the information is up to you. Free to ask questions. I don't debate anybody. I just give information. I will answer a question. I will not answer a question that is a negative about somebody's religion and everything else. Because God gave us free choice. We're in his image. We can choose what we want to believe and not believe, as witnessed by elections in many countries around the world. We can choose the way we want to walk or don't want to walk. But the Torah itself and all the other books around it have to do with what God would like us to do, how he would like us to become complete human beings. And I'm going to say this now. I always say it once in every broadcast. Go to Ecclesiastes, go to chapter 12, go down to the last 4 lines. And Solomon says, and the translations in most Bibles are wrong. The word in Hebrew there says they translate it as duty. It's the duty of all man to fear God and to do what he says. But in Hebrew, it translates that if you fear God and do what he tells you to do, you are a complete human being. It makes you a complete person. And he made us in his image, and so he wants us to be that complete person. He wants us to be compassionate and kind. He doesn't want us to be constantly putting people down and living in the negative. It's just, he wants us to treat everybody with love. Now, everybody's heard this before. I'm going to say it again right here at the beginning real quick. If you want to know what Torah is in one sentence, and this is different than what most people hear all the time, so you got to think about it. Torah simply is the instructions on how you don't do to anybody else what you don't want done to yourself. And that's a pretty big sentence, because that means you're not supposed to get angry with them, embarrass them, humiliate them, steal from them, do anything to other people that you do not want done to yourself. Not do unto others. It's do not do to others. This is the way Hashem, God, gives us our instructions. If you look at the 10 Commandments, the last 4 or 5 are all don't do's. Don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, don't do that. Because it's a very simple thing. Like we teach our children, don't cross the street in the middle of the block. That's it. The Torah tells us what we're not supposed to do. Then we have a whole section of literature that tells us what we are supposed to do. That's called the Oral Torah. But God starts with giving us the commands that he doesn't want us to do. He says, if you do these things, it's not good for you. Not that it's not good for him, it's not good for you. And that's how we raise kids, and that's how God raised his kids, all of us, every single human being that's ever been born. That's what he wants from all of us. I don't remember if I said hi to James. There he is. Hi, James. And it's important that we remember this. And I'm going to get into some explanations of it a little later on. But I think Scotty's got some questions. We got a really good question from somebody who needs to know the answer. And we're going to give it because I never thought that somebody would ask the question. I never even thought of the question. It's pretty cool. And so we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But Scotty, you have some other questions you want to talk about?
Well, I've got something I want to put in the mix and have you talk about it. Now I know we're here strictly to give information, and some people would say, "Well, why would I need to seek information? Why would I need it?" And so I had a discussion with some gentlemen this morning, and I was talking to this one gentleman who I know, and of course the others were listening, I know where he lives. I know the house he lives in, and he was always complaining about the house being in disarray. You know, there's rot around the windows, blah, blah, blah. And I said, you know, when you were buying that house, why didn't you look at the structure? Why didn't you take notice of everything and weigh it out? Why didn't you, you know, look at the integrity of the house? And he said, well, I inherited the house, so I really didn't have to look at the integrity. I just got it. That's the way it always was. And it really didn't bother me till I got to a certain age. And I said, you know, when you buy a house, you check the integrity of that house. You even hire somebody to come in, check the stress levels. They check the foundation. They check the windows. And if there's the least little bit of thing wrong, you don't buy the house. And I said, we need to do our relationship, you know, like that with our relation, what we think our relationship with the Creator. If it's strong, you can put it under scrutiny. So
Right.
Can you discuss that a little bit and go a little bit more elaborate on that?
Yeah, that's good. It's a good analogy. Also, it's you know, when you go to buy a house, generally you bring in a guy that goes over the house from top to bottom. He tells you this needs fixing, this needs fixing, and this needs fixing before you should buy it. Don't buy it until this is fixed, and that's great. But when you inherit the house and you walk in and you start looking around and you say, wait a minute, you got mold around the windows, got a leak by the floorboard here. The pipes need replacing because they're lead and not copper, or whatever. Nowadays it's plastic, I guess. It's not, it has nothing to do with copper. But when you see a mistake or see something, then you take the steps to correct it. You get the information you need to correct whatever problem you have. If you don't do that, then you have a problem personally. Eventually, you're going to have a bigger problem. This has the same thing to do with how God tells us the number one, oh, it's not a commandment even. I can't even say it's a commandment, but the many religions list the 10 commandments, and the first one is, I am God. It's you're commanded to love God. Well, there's not a commandment there. God's simply stating who he is. Take it or leave it. You can do what you want. If you don't take it, you can partially take it or have nothing to do with it. There are people that don't have anything to do with God. That's their own decision what to do. It's not my business what they do. It's not your business what they do, because not even God gets involved in that with you personally. You've never have God come out and wag a finger at you and say, wait a minute, why do you believe this instead of that? He doesn't do that. He leaves us. You ever heard the expression, give a person enough ropes so they'll hang themselves? An old expression. God just lets us all go our own way. And he will, in many cases, just say, okay, if that's what you want to believe, I'm going to leave you to believe it, and I'll even help you reinforce to believe it. One of the biggest statements on that is from a couple of weekly Torah portions ago. It says, God hardened Pharaoh's heart. This was, from the beginning, one of the biggest debated and discussed statements in all of the 5 books of Moses. What do you mean God hardens his heart? What happened to our free choice? You mean I might be believing something that God it tells me has put me in a direction to believe that way? And it's been talked about and talked about. And many commentaries have been written about it. But essentially, if you want so much to go in that direction to believe something, God lets you go. Okay, I'm not going to force you. Believe what you want to believe. He's not going to debate with you. If you decide I've closed my door on getting information about who God of Israel is, and that's what the number one statement is of the 10, know that I am God, the God of Israel. So if you're talking to a different God, you're not talking about the creator. You may think you are in your own mind, but the creator of all things says, I am God. The word is Anochi, which is a very specific word to Hashem himself. And the reason we use even himself is because the Hebrew language is all based on masculine or feminine, and it'd be pretty weird to call God it. So what's the word, Scotty? Amorphosize. we give God a strong right hand, because we know what that is.
Anthropomorphism.
Thank you. Anthropomorphism. I always have trouble getting that off my tongue. We give God human qualities so we can understand what's going on. We can't understand infinity. We can't understand, because we're finite in the shape that we're in now. We can't understand what infinity is. We can't understand a lot of things God says. So we have to rely on, I'm going to give you a good example. Everybody knows the word radio. You can use the word radio anywhere in the world, and everybody knows what you're talking about. It's an identical word in every language of the world, radio. Now, some have made it fancy in whatever language you're in, but the word radio, everybody understands. It's been there forever. It wasn't invented with the radio. There are in the Talmud, there are in explanations of different things, there's mentioned radio. But back in the day, they couldn't say a radio's, you turn on your electric switch on the radio and you catch these waves going through the air and it comes out in speakers. So radio, back long before there ever was a twinkle in anybody's eye to invent one, was used in Talmudic literature, was described as a demon that can go from one end of the earth to the other instantly. Isn't that something? A radio, back then they called a demon. They didn't know how to explain it any other way. It would have been so easy if Moses had gone up on Mount Sinai, downloaded everything from an iCloud, put it in a tablet that way, and we'd have it today. But of course, those things didn't exist back then. Well, let's put it this way. They did exist, but they weren't put together and used until whenever they came out to the public, because God created everything in creation. So anyway, let's go back to the house analogy. You have a house and you just spot a problem. It can be one little tiny problem. The guy can say, come and look at, you see, you got a leak, and these windows around this area of the house haven't been installed and sealed properly. So the water goes into the wall, and from there it gets down to your basement, or it comes out under the drywall on your wood floors, if you live in a house with wooden floors. And so you got a couple of options. I can replace my floors, replace the drywall, and not take care of the problem of the water coming through the windows. So you have to go to the basic beginning of the problem, get the information how to correct the problem, and any further steps that you have to do to continue fixing the problem. If you're going to spend the money to seal your windows, then somebody comes in the house and says, oh, you got a water leak. Look at that floor. Look at those walls. Why would you not take the time to correct all the problems that came from the initial problem? In other words, if you get a question and you want an explanation about something, you want to get the information you need to make an informed decision on what to do. Now, that house is inherited. Maybe it's the third generation, maybe the fourth. The people that were there before may have had a problem and couldn't solve it. Or maybe at that time it was okay at that time, but then all these cracks used to come in and all this stuff all of a sudden, all kinds of questions came up as to how solid the house was. So that's why in many parts, we heard in Miami, a building collapsed because the infrastructure of the building disintegrated over the years from water damage, and a lot of people were killed. That was a couple of months back. We hear of other things. Bridges collapse. You build a bridge and it's not stable enough because someone made a miscalculation. And years later, maybe 50, maybe 70 years later, you got 150 cars going across it. And God forbid the whole thing falls in the water. You see, not everything that we, the Washington Monument. I grew up near Washington, D.C. I was there all the time. Do you know how many times that place was closed to fix stairways, to fix stones, to fix water leaks? The initial structure was there, but over time, you see that it wasn't really put together the way it was supposed to be put together or should have been, or when they put it together, they didn't have the proper tools that they have today to correct it. So things have to be undone, redone. It's an important thing, and you always have to think about that. Now, most of us take our cars for tune-ups, about once a year at least, minimum, oil changes and so forth. Some cars don't need oil changes for 2 years, depending on the oil you're using. But you're always maintaining and maintaining and maintaining. Check the water, check the oil. You always have to keep refilling the gas tank. You have to check the antifreeze to make sure it's working, especially people haven't checked it in years across many parts of America and here too in Israel, because it's so cold here right now. Oh my goodness. Where I am, I didn't realize that it had this cold a winter in Israel. I'm up on top of a mountain, been here for about 5 years, and I never had cold like this in any other parts of Israel. When I lived down by the Mediterranean, didn't have this problem. When I lived closer to the desert, didn't have this problem. But up here, ooh, it gets cold. And my electric bill jumped way up. Like everybody else's, I guess in America, it's gas and oil for heating. Here, everything's electric, other than cooking. So, but if I don't take, here's another example. I have water pipes. We have solar heaters on the roof and a big solar panel up there. And it heats the water, puts it up into like a thermal container. And then when you turn the faucet on, it comes down into the house. Well, you can heat it up with electricity also if you want, like during the winter when there isn't enough sun. And because the pipes run on the outside of the building, going up and down the building for that heating system, they can freeze real easy. The cold water pipe going up and the hot water pipe coming down, if there isn't some kind of it moving through, it doesn't come down and into the house like it does in the States where you have your hot water boiler. Everything comes from the roof. So when we get weather like this, we have to leave the hot water tap at least dripping so there's movement of the water all the time, up and down, so it doesn't freeze. Now, if people don't get the information to do that, the plumbers make some money. Their water pipes freeze, they have to replace them. The stuff in the house is built into the house itself, so there's not a problem of it freezing. But on the roof, there's a problem with it. So on a house like that, anything has to do with your life where you're living in it, or you think you know what is a truth, you always have to update yourself on information, but you have to be very, very careful where you get the information from. Today they use these things called infomercials. They used to be on TV all night. Now they're, every time you open an internet and a lot of YouTube channels you put on there, you're bombarded with these information commercials every 45 minutes or every 15 minutes, depending on whoever the producer has it set. And they're telling you how to do something better. But it doesn't do any good just to take that information and do it better without buying this product or that product to help you do it better. And if you change it, everything else is going to change. Well, you always have to be doing that to your head up here. You always have to be updating it with information, fixing it, so to speak, getting the rot out. Just because you inherited it from someone else doesn't mean that it's something that needs to be left the way it is. I remember it happened to some of my friends, and you read about it happening on in the news. They even write about it. Some guy makes a lot of money, builds an empire, leaves it to the next generation, and within one generation or a generation and a half, the money's all gone. Because they got the money and they're just using it any way they please. They didn't learn how to handle what they had, and it was totally destroyed. Our belief in God is the same. When people first came out when we first started populating the earth, we were pretty pagan, we did a lot of pagan rituals and a lot of pagan things, which up until today have slowly been removed from society. Now, there's some little corners in society that do pagan stuff, but most of it's gone. One or two religions in particular still have a lot of paganism built into them, which people now accept as it's okay, including human sacrifice and eating the meat of somebody and drinking their blood, these are all things absolutely forbidden by God, the God of Israel. So how did it get involved into other religions? It doesn't make any difference what religion it is. It got involved because man decided they're going to change what God wants. It's a simple, when you look at it in the simple, that's what happened. So now I've inherited a house that went from my grandfather to my father to me. And I can't just say, I'm going to leave this house the way it is because this is the way my father lived in it. And this is the way my grandfather lived in it. I don't care if it's fallen down. I don't care if it's become rickety. I don't care if you can see through the walls. This is the way they did it. This is the way I'm going to do it. You see how ridiculous a statement that is. You're going to fix the house. You want it to be in good shape. It's the same thing with every single part of your life. It's the same thing. You have to constantly be updating and getting new information. You have to constantly be learning about what God wanted. And does it follow through what he says here? Does it follow through until today? Are we still doing what he wants? So it's really important that we are constantly questioning those types of things, which we're going to talk about things like that. If we get time this week, then we'll do it next week. If not, but I don't know, Scotty, does that kind of get on to the subject matter of what you were looking at?
Yes, perfectly. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Are you ready for me to ask this? Because I want you to have plenty enough time to discuss this Midrash.
Okay, go ahead.
We got a text from somebody and it said, Scotty, I have a question I wish you could ask Pesach to explain. Sunday night, now this is past Sunday night, y'all said Jethro didn't convert. And of course, he had asked you about the conversion, and he said it was Midrash, in Midrash that he converted, and asking if you could give some explanation. And so I'll start the question off that. What is Midrash? What is that term or that position?
Okay. Now there was something else he said in that, maybe not in that version you got.
He said, I came out of religion that told lies, and I don't want to get into another one that does also. How does it help? Why say it is not the truth? And if it's okay to lie and call it a midrash. So I didn't want to read that part because that
makes the question really important. See, that's the thing.
Okay.
that makes it important.
I think I go around telling once. Let's see. I want to get down to a part here. It says, oh, I thought it was here he was talking about. No, it was you that put on about exegetical study. So
Right.
go ahead. Did I give you enough of it right there? Did I give you?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
First of all, the guy's question is a legitimate question. If you're coming out of man-made religion, it says right in the prophecies that people around the world start realizing that their forefathers gave them nothing but lies. Don't remember exactly where, but it's there. I didn't have time to Google it. And he's got a very legitimate and good question. And I'm going to start it this way. First of all, what we do is not a religion. It's never called a religion by God. He never said, I created myself so you guys could worship me and I could control you and tell you what to do in all things. No, he says he created us in his image, which gives us a lot of options, a lot of free choice. But he says, if you want to be complete about being in my image, here's how you do it. Now, when we've been getting things, we're going to go back 3,334 years at Mount Sinai is when things were, God gave us the Torah and it was written down. And he gave the Oral Torah to Moses. And we hear in it that Abraham followed Torah, and Isaac followed Torah, and Jacob followed Torah, and the sons of Jacob, Israel, the children of Israel, they followed it. Well, they followed whatever they knew at the time, which was revealed to them. But when we all got to Mount Sinai, God said, okay, guys, here's how I want you to do this. I'm going to tell you what I want you to do. And then he gave us the Oral Torah also, which has been passed on through generation to generation to generation orally, exactly what it says. It was forbidden to write it down until about 2,000 years ago when Rome was being destroyed. It was destroying Jerusalem. And a guy called Judah the Prince, who was head of the temple research and development, so to speak, he went to the Romans and he says, look, okay, we understand what's going on. God is doing what he's doing, but we want to continue for the sons of Israel, sons and daughters, to go forward and be able to take it with them wherever they go in exile in the world, wherever they get thrown to in the world, across Europe, and then eventually America, of course, South America, Africa, wherever they go. So they have a basis of what we have today, the Torah plus what we call the Mishneh Torah, or the accompaniment to Torah. And he made a deal with the Romans that him and a few other people could get out of there, get away from the fighting and everything that was going on before it all came to an end. And they moved to Netivot. And they set up shop there and they started writing everything down. The first time all this stuff was not the Torah, not the prophets, but all the other stuff was written down. So they wrote it down, made a compilation of it, and now today, wherever Jews lived in the world, whether it was in Yemen or whether it was in Egypt, after, of course, what happened there, or in Africa, or in England, or in Australia, or wherever anybody they would go, they would be taking the same basic literature with them. And then, as they form groups and communities, those books are opened up and they're read to the congregations there, and they're all about the same. And it's called Mishneh Torah. Rambam is the biggest guy that everybody uses today as an authority. Maimonides, that's what we follow basically. And I'll get into why in just a minute. Before him, there were many, many sages. There were what we call the Tanaim, the people that decided they're going to put everything down so we all have it. They then over the centuries, it's updated and updated, not changed. Because today, if you tell Moses, here's a lighter, start a fire, he's going to look at it and he's not going to know what it is. We have lighters to start fires today. Back then, he used to carry it in a pot. Read about what he took up on Mount Moriah to do the binding of Jacob. He took a fire pot with him. Today, it's okay to take a book of matches with you. We don't have to be carrying fire pots around. There's progress in things, and they go forward. So lots of times things, the explanation of them changes. So we have something called Midrash. So Midrash, let me see which page I want to open first. Midrash essentially is exposition and investigation. And in Hebrew, in plural, it's midrashim. We don't say midrashes because that's English and it doesn't fit, but midrashim is plural. It's a mode of biblical interpretation prominent in Talmudic literature. There are rules and regulations what you can do and can't do in midrash. The term is also used to refer to a separate body of commentaries on scripture that use this interpretive mode. Okay. It is, in Hebrew, it's, if you translate the word midrash, which also means pirush or explanation of what you're reading. So in Yemen, they might have done a meaning of what was written in a way that the people in that neighborhood in Yemen understood what was written. They wouldn't use what somebody in England understood because England wouldn't understand what was talking about in Yemen. They didn't have internet in those days. They didn't have common languages except the Hebrew in those days between the Jews. They didn't have instant communication. So each little body of or city or group of Jewish people had their own interpretations that the rabbis would use to teach with. Now, there's some rules that go along with it. Today, I think the word is exegesis. Did I say that right?
Yes. The adjective part of that is exegetical study.
Okay, exegetical study. It's called exegesis, and is the critical interpretation of the biblical text to discover its intended meaning. Because every time somebody reads something, they put their own meaning to it. Every time they hear something, when you read the news, you put your own meaning to it. When you get statistics about, let's use COVID, everybody has a different meaning. And everybody believes what they want to believe, what's in their head. But there are rules about it. Interpretation of the Bible has always been considered a prerequisite for Jewish theological doctrine. Let's put it that way. And it makes up a major portion of books. If you go into a Jewish person's home, you look on their back wall, look at Scotty's wall back there. I know it's a background, Scotty, but I think, right?
No, it's not. Those are
real deal books.
That's all my books, and I've got another shelf over to the left that has that many on it too. I'm not as thorough with them as good as you and Terry are. When I go to look for something, I have to really look. But yes, that's no more backdrop. That's all.
Okay. Now, what is all that stuff? What are all these books? What are the Bibles with commentary from Jewish rabbis alongside? They have the commentary from Rashi, And if anybody knows about it, the Jewish Bible has commentary on. Rashi gave meanings of words in the Bible, and talked about where they came from or why it's connected to this and what it means. And he's also one of the number one people. Everybody, you hold up whatever you got next to these guys. Rashi, Onkelos, who was a convert, who was Greek, who is as important as Rashi is. And we have all of these writings from people that have been studying, and not only studying, when you open yourself up with God, not everybody can do this, but certain people can. They will get explanations. They will get visions. They'll read something and say, wow, I see now what's going on here. So what happens is, the exegesis, whatever how you pronounce it, the purpose is to explain. That's what a midrash is. Let's take the 10 Commandments, as we call them in English. In Hebrew, they're simply the 10 said statements of God. 10 things that he spoke out to the whole world. When you get into the second half of the tablet, you start getting like, don't do this, don't do that, don't do the other thing. Don't steal, don't murder, don't, in Hebrew it's tinof. I don't know exactly how to say it in English other than you don't mess around. You got a wife, stick with her. But these things are just, God gave us simple statements like we were children. He gave us simple statements like when we tell our children we're allowing them to leave the yard, they can stay on the sidewalk, but they can't cross a block. They can't cross a street. And if a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old says, why? You can't give them a long explanation because you're going to end up in the hospital and you might get killed and because they're not listening. So what do we tell them? Because I said so. As he gets older, as a child gets older, he or she, they begin some of it to understand by themselves, but a lot of it they're taught in grade school. You don't cross the street except by a crosswalk when you see a green light in the direction you want to go. And then you explain all the reasons why. I mean, it sounds pretty simple, right? When you say it, it's a simple thing. But as you get older, that simple statement, don't cross the street in the middle of a block. As you get older, you start the questions why and what, and and then you start getting explanations of it. That's what exegesis is for the Torah. That's what Midrash is for the Torah. And we have something that explains it, and it's called Pardes, Pardes. And the P, the R, and the D are capitalized. So it's an acronym, Pardes. The very first thing there, the first part of it is the PA part is, we say in Hebrew, pshat, or the simple part of what's said. It's not the black and white. You read it. This is what it says. Don't steal. That's the simple part of it. But who puts the definition on the word steal? What does it mean? Don't go into somebody else's house and take what they got. Don't take their pets. Don't take their sheep. Don't take their shirt. It never says there that when you start gossip and take away a person's good name, that's the same thing as theft in any language. When you take away their good name. There are many other things, we have a saying in Hebrew. I'm going to translate it roughly. actually, I'm going to translate it literally. Go prove your sister is not a prostitute. If somebody says something about your sister, or go prove that your son, your brother is not a pimp. Once the word gets out, it's over with. You can't put it back into the box. Somewhere out there, everybody's going to think that this person's a pimp or this person's a prostitute. It's over with. You can explain all you want. The other person going to look like, but this is what I heard. So what we want to do is we take the simple of it, and we're going to call it don't steal. The second part, which is the R, is the word remez, which means hint. We see don't steal. As we get older, we realize, wait a minute, he's not talking about just physical things. There's something else involved here. Then you go look for what else is involved, and that's called drash. Drash is a homily. It's a homily that can be derived from what is said. And what are homilies? Because I had to go look them up because I didn't remember my high school teaching. Homilies is a discourse that is intended primarily for spiritual edification rather than doctrinal instruction, or even you can call it a sermon. So we go out and we start looking for the truth. Now, I pick up this book and I don't bother looking to see who wrote it. And I said, wow, man, that's really cool. Yeah, I think I'm going to believe this way. It sounds good to me. And you just close it and put it down. You may pick up another one and say, wow, this doesn't quite agree with the other one I heard, so I'm going to go believe the other one. The problem here is if you don't check who wrote it and who talked about it, you may be dropping yourself right into the frying pan, out of the frying pan into the fire. You may be going into idolatry from what God thinks is idolatry, not what you think it is. You may be going into many other places. So you always want to check. You always want to check who wrote the book. Now, I know that many religions have their own people that wrote their books, but these people are writing explanations to us from their way of seeing things and the way they interpreted them. And this is totally, totally wrong way of doing things. For whoever they're dealing with, their people, that's fine. But for human beings, we have a certain specific way of doing Midrash. There are rules and regulations. It says don't steal. We don't steal, but we never think about, okay, I took some staples home from the office. I took some paper home from the office. That's okay. I work here. They got plenty of it. It's no problem. People don't think it's stealing. When you take a break and they pay you for a 15-minute break and you stand sitting around for 40 minutes or 45 minutes before you go back to work, you're stealing time from the company. That's stealing. So it has to be, they are pointed out in what we call drash, in looking for interpretation of what it means to steal. One guy might write about the staples, somebody else might write about the paper, some people else might write about the time that is stolen, but each one is a very valid thing. You can't say any of it is not true because they're all true. They can't be proven wrong. All Midrash is the same way. When you listen to Midrash, you can say, I don't believe that. I'm going to look for another one. And I don't believe that. Oh, wait a minute. I'm going to say this one over here. I'm going to go with that one. I'm going to go with that explanation. Well, that's okay if you want. But the ones you rejected because they didn't fit right in your head were for somebody else to say, oh, that sounds good. I understand it that way. So you can't say any of them were wrong as long as they keep to the point you will not steal. Or you will not be immoral. Some people think some things are immoral and other people think they aren't. A Midrash always sticks to the point that God intended. You start with don't steal and you end up with don't steal, but in between, they're explained in a different way because everybody has a different way of hearing things. So it's going to click with somebody. Oh, this one clicks with me, but you can't say all the rest are wrong. We don't even have to think about it. We don't have to make the decision. We don't have to criticize. We can say it was easier for me to understand it this way or that way, but they're all right. Nobody's trying to get your attention and trying to tell you this is wrong and this is right. They're explaining to you what it is that the simple statement God made and what he wants. And believe me, for people that have been studying God's word for 3,300 years, when somebody comes along, whether it was 2,000 years ago or 1,600 years ago, and tries to tell us we got it wrong, they don't even know what they're talking about because they've never studied it from the beginning. They just jumped in the middle. Kind of like a friend tells you go see this movie and it's really funny and you really liked it, or it was a really good action movie. And you get there halfway through the movie. You sit there and you watch the movie and you go back to your friend, I didn't get the same thing out of the movie you did. But your friend saw it from the beginning, you came in the middle. So probably what your friend says is more true than anything anybody's told you about the movie, is more true than your own impressions and what you think about the movie just because you saw an hour of it. God doesn't work that way. Everything starts from creation. That's why the 5 books of Moses starts with creation. So we all know everything. It's all there. And if you follow the writings of the people that developed their personal relationship with God in a strong way, and he can convey information to them to convey it to the rest of the world. Now, God never says go evangelize. He never said force people to do it. And if they don't, cut off their head. He never tells people to go kill some people because they think differently than you. He simply says, give them the information. If they can take it or they can leave it, which makes it totally a personal thing for each person in every generation. Not something to say, well, I inherited it from my parents, and if I got to do what they did because that's honoring them. Well, it's not honoring them. Go read what honoring your parents means. If your parents used to every morning get up and start a fire in the middle of the floor to cook on, you got it from your parents, but all of a sudden somebody says, hey, we got gas stoves. Well, I'm not going to use a gas stove because I'm not honoring my parents. Not right. So we get to the point where we have these Midrash, the explanations. Then there's one more level. It's called Sod, or the mystical secrets that are held within that do not steal. And believe me, there's tons of them. And you can even go down and study that if you want. It's okay. You can just stop at, I got a hint, and wow. The Midrash, the explanation says you don't steal, and that applies to paper in the office and time and my neighbor's fruit hanging over my yard from his fruit tree, and it's hanging over in my yard, so I'm going to, it's mine, and things like that. That's what the deeper explanation. So we have, it's called Pardes, Remez, Drash, Peshat, Remez, Drash, and Sod. Sod is the basis of it. And many times when you get down to that deep mystical secret in there, you say, wait a minute, there's more. And that's what our greatest sages have done. It goes even deeper and deeper. When I mention the word Kabbalah, because that's a book that was written over 2,000 years ago that just kind of disappeared, I think, until the 13th century. Because I guess God didn't want us playing with it. And we have the Talmud that was written during the Babylonian exile, one in Jerusalem, one in Babylonia. And those are actual rabbis sitting around in a group saying, how does whatever this, why can't a man and a woman go into a room alone and not close the door? Why does someone have to leave a door open? When is it okay for a man and a woman to go in a room? Whether it's in a ruin or whether it's out in the country in a tent or whatever. Then you get down into the deeper and deeper mystical things. And it all has to do with altinaf. Don't be moral at all times. And all of you have been around, even in your office, where the talk gets kind of raunchy sometimes. People flirting with each other. I didn't even know what the word meant until somebody explained it to me. Or somebody just happened to run into, and you're having you stop off at your favorite pub to have a beer on the way home, and some woman starts talking to you, or some guy starts talking to you. All these are deeper meanings of things. So let's put this all together. Jethro, there's a Midrash that says he converted to be a Jew. It's someone's explanation that they drew from the information that was given to them in Torah, in the 5 books of Moses, and what previous people had written about it. Well, when I learned it and it said he converted, I had a problem. I couldn't follow that 1 and 1 is 2 here. Everything with God is logical. 1 and 1 is 2. Now, I'm going to go back to some high school algebra. 1 plus 1 equals 2. But if you open it up a little bit, 1 plus 1 minus 3 plus 4 minus 1 comes out to 1, or to 2, I mean. It always comes out to the same answer. It never changes. And I don't know if the example I gave is truly that. I was doing it in my head as we were going along. But there's more than just the simple 1 plus 1 is 2. There's a whole lot of things involved in getting the 1 plus 1 to be 2. There could have been a lot of different things and a lot of different numbers in there, but they have word games, math games about it now. You can get on the internet, like Sudoku that they do with words. They do it now with these math problems. And a lot of people are getting to like it, and so there are more and more coming out. So when I read the story of Jethro, I see what happened in the Torah. Jethro, of course, is Moses' father-in-law. And he met him 40 years earlier when he left Egypt, and we're not going to go into the whole story why Moses had to leave Egypt, but he ended up marrying one of his sons. At that time, Jethro was living out in the middle of nowhere. And we just think of him as some shepherd, some guy out in the middle of nowhere raising sheep. But when he was out there, is one of his break times. Jethro was a very learned man. There wasn't a god on earth that Jethro hadn't investigated and worshipped. As a matter of fact, when he comes to meet Moses in the desert, he's called the Kohen, or the high priest of Midian. He was in that office at that time. So he was not some sheep guy that never was uneducated or didn't want to be educated or was making up his own stuff as we go along. And I know we're running out of time, so I'll kind of wind this down. If we need more time next week, we can do it. He comes and says, wow, there is not a God I have not worshipped. And I've never seen a God as powerful as your God and as merciful, what he has done for the Jewish people, the children of Israel, but because back then the word Jew wasn't around. That's a word that came into play around the time of Mordechai and the Persian Empire and so forth. But the point is, he says to Moses, wow, you guys have one heck of a God. Look what he did for you. He took you out of slavery. He gave you freedom. I'm inviting all of you. I want to have a meal in his honor. And I personally want to thank him that I found out he's the most powerful God and the truest God in the world. And they did it. And they blessed God. But you know what? Up until that point, they hadn't blessed God. They hadn't thanked God for bringing them out of Egypt. So Jethro led them through. Let's give praise and thanks to your God, the God of Israel, for being the most powerful and strongest God in the world. And they did it. And some Midrash says, if the children of Israel had not been kind of coerced or reminded by Jethro to thank him for what he did, we wouldn't have gotten Torah at Mount Sinai because we weren't ready for it. So Jethro is absolutely credited with helping us finish that, what we had to do to get to Mount Sinai. Now, the first Midrash about Jethro is he converted to be a Jew because he said all these great things. It never says he converted. He just said all these great things. Never said that he became Jewish. It was assumed he did, but I look at it and say, wait a minute. If he converted, why didn't he stick with the Jewish people? Why didn't he stick with Israel in the desert? Because he went to Moses and said, okay, I'm leaving. See you later. Moses said, why are you leaving? What's going on here? He says, I want to go tell everybody about the God of Israel. Well, good. That's nice. Go tell everybody. And that's a legitimate thing to do. There's plenty of people on this earth today are talking about the true God of Israel and everything he's done and how he looks after people. But that doesn't mean they're Jewish. So I couldn't understand until I found and read another Midrash that said that that's exactly what he did. He left. I couldn't understand how a person who discovers the truth about God would want to walk away from it, especially in those days, especially in the middle of a desert. And I understood from the other Midrash that what he did was go out and teach other people about the God of Israel, but he never converted to be Jewish. The outcome is the same. There's no change in any of the outcome of what happened and what we read in Torah. It's just, to me, it made sense. 1 and 1 is 2 here. Now, I'm going to use, because it's the only example I know I can use that most people are going to understand. There are Protestants and Christians all over the world trying to convince Jews to believe in the man from Nazareth. And the first thing they tell them is he was born of a virgin. That never could compute with me and who God is. God could do what he wants, but he doesn't. He does everything logically. And even in the Jewish explanations, it was written for at least 1,000 years or 1,500 years before this man from Nazareth came on. The Messiah was known as someone born from a man and a woman in the line of David. Now, you're going to tell me that God impregnated sure, he could do it, but he doesn't do illogical things. So you're going to tell me that he could. I can't tell you he can't do it. I can tell you he wouldn't do it. Because the minute you put in mythology into what you're believing, you can believe anything. You can believe that the devil is a human being. You can believe that the devil can throw God out of heaven. He can fight with God. There's all kinds of things you can believe. It gets into mythology like the Greeks and the Romans had. When you want an explanation of what happened, you always ask yourself, who wrote it? And does it begin and end exactly the way it says in Torah? And you have to do that. In the middle part, all kinds of things can happen. But the beginning and end have to be exactly the way it says in Torah. So this is essentially what Midrash is. It explains to us what happened in a way that we can relate to it and understand it, even if it has to use anthropomorphisms to explain about God. Because it's easier for us to understand, but you need to understand God doesn't have any of those. That's us. But it's easier for us to understand it if it's put in a way that we can understand it. Terry, Jeremiah 16:19. Oh Lord, who are my strength, who are my power and my strength and my refuge in the day of trouble. To you, nations will come from the ends of the earth and say, only lies have our fathers handed us down to us, emptiness in which there is nothing of any avail. Jeremiah 16:19. And we also have the statement that as people start wanting information, they're going to come to Jewish people. They're going to grab the hold of the tzitzit, little fringes that come off a man. Now, this is a homily, maybe, but it's giving you a visualization of what's going to happen, but it may only happen in a mental way. Who knows? Where 10 people come and grab the tzitzit of a Jewish person and says, I want to be with you because God is with you. That's what it says, because God is with you. In the Jewish Midrash, it says it's not 10 men. Every tzitzit has a whole bunch of strings to it. It says one man is going to hold each one of the strings. So we're responsible for giving information to all that many men. I forget, 100, 150 or 1,500. I just forget because it's not that important to me, but I understand what it's saying. People are going to come and say, God is with you. We want to know about God. This is what got me involved with this all that many years ago, talking to people that were not Jewish. So it's really, really important that everything that God writes and given us is true. So we know that people are going to come up to Jerusalem and say to us, only lies our fathers have handed down to us, emptiness in which there's nothing of any avail. Come on now. You inherit a house from somebody. What a beautiful house. You go inside and see the house needs more than it's worth to fix it, so it's worth it. There's emptiness in the house. You might as well start get a new house, because what you need to do is you can either take something that's already put together and nice and neat, which is easier than taking something that needs repair and trying to tell the difference between what do I need to repair and what I don't need to repair. And a lot of it has to do with the way people think about God. It's easier just to throw it out and say, okay, I'm not going there. I'm just going to build it from new. Knock it down, including the foundations that I stand my feet on, and I'm going to start learning from new and see what comes out. And it's so important. And we also learn something else, because there's a humbleness in all of this. Whatever we think doesn't mean anything. You never see a rabbi gives a sermon on Shabbat. You never see a congregant stand up and say, well, I don't think that's the way it is. I think it's this other way. And arguments start. And then the guy that stood up and said that says, okay, come on, we can't be in this congregation anymore. They don't think the way we think. And they go next door and buy the building next door and put up another synagogue, or you turn it into a synagogue. Not allowed. Not allowed. Okay, sorry I went over time, but this is an important conversation for everybody. And I really think that if you have any questions about any of this, you can go to my Facebook page, friend me, and send me a question. Go to Scotty, send him a question. You listen to Terry's teachings on Wednesday nights at 8 o'clock in the USA, New York time. Ask questions. You're allowed to question. Lots of people, why do religions, any religion, don't want people to question? Because that people might accidentally come upon the truth. So they tell you, just believe it because we said it. You'll never see a rabbi say, believe it because I said it. What he says is, believe it because God said it. If God didn't say it, you don't have to believe it. You know, I'm not Tuvia Singer, and I don't get into all that stuff, but if God made it in nature that man and a woman bring forth seed, he's not going to all of a sudden disrupt that nature and say, look, hey, here's a woman pregnant that I did. Well, he does every one of us anyway. Every creation is, every human being is created by a mother, a father, and God. God decides whether that seed is going to be fruitful or not. So you were decided upon to be born on this earth because God needs you here. Not randomly. And that's a whole nother thing. Okay, Scotty, people are getting tired and yeah.
Awesome job. Thank you so much, Rabbi. Awesome job.
You're welcome.
I have people question sometimes why I call you Rabbi. And I think we covered this one time before, because you are my teacher. And that's basically what that means. So thank you so much, Rabbi.
You're quite welcome. Yes, I didn't go and I didn't grow up as an observant Jew. And when you go through the study system to be an observant Jew, most Jews end up with the title rabbi because that's like getting a bachelor's degree in a college. But the term rabbi, you can use as a term of honor for someone who's your teacher. You're following what they teach, or you can question. And those of you out there that think that don't trouble me, it's not, because you were brought that up with some other religion. Don't bother me. I can't be bothered right now. I'm too busy. Don't do that. Any rabbi is never too busy. He'll eventually, even if he gets a ton of email every day or voice messages, he'll get back to you. And he'll make the time, because that's what we're supposed to do. Just relay information to people. I love you guys very much, and I appreciate you coming and sticking with us. And Scotty and Terry, thank you for being a partner with me and all the work we do. Wendell, Thomas, Ronald, good to see you first time. James and Karen, great seeing you. And I don't know why I cannot remember your husband's name. What's Scotty?
Harold.
Oh, it is Harold. Okay, I was going to say Harold, but I was afraid I was going to get it wrong. I got to remember HO. If any of you that grew up in the day when you had model train sets, there was an HO gauge. So I'll have to use that to remember with. They tell me at my age, the best thing to do is associate what you want to remember with something else, and you remember it better. So I'm so glad you guys come and visit with us. And we'll see you next week, same place and same time.
All right. I'm going to do my final close here before everybody does the wave. Remember, those of you that are listening by Torah for the Nations YouTube channel, subscribe to that channel. Hit that notification bell that you'll be notified every time that we do a live video. Those of you that are listening by B'nai Noach Connection with Israel Facebook page, like that video, comment there. You can ask questions and share that video with all your social media platforms. Until next time, we'll be looking for you.